When were you the most terrified in your life? What's the most terrifying moment you've ever lived through? For me, it was the day I stared absolute rage in the face, utterly convinced I was about to die, with nothing but a flimsy glass door between me and a man wielding a crowbar. It all started innocently enough. My friend, Chloe, begged me to watch her boutique. She needed to go to court, to finally get a restraining order against Wilson, the employee she'd fired just last week after he'd attacked her. I walked into her shop at 9 a.m., and the air was thick with dread. Chloe, usually a whirlwind of energy, was a ghost of herself, her eyes wide with a fear I hadn't seen before. Her hands trembled as she showed me how to lock the door from the inside, pointing to the tiny, discreet panic button hidden under the register. "Wilson doesn't know about the hearing today," she whispered, her voice barely a thread, "but keep the door locked anyway. Only let in customers who knock." Her fingers, still shaking, pressed the keys into my palm. "I'll be back by noon, latest." I nodded, trying to project a calm I didn't feel, and locked the door behind her, flipping the sign to "by appointment only." The first hour was unnervingly quiet. I tried to focus, reorganizing displays, but my mind kept drifting to Wilson. Chloe had told me he'd actually thrown her into a wall when she fired him for stealing. Just thinking about it sent shivers down my spine. Around 10:30, a woman knocked, wanting to browse. I let her in, my eyes darting to the street the entire time she shopped, a knot tightening in my stomach. She left without buying anything, and I double-locked the door immediately. By 11 o'clock, a sliver of relief started to creep in. Chloe would be back soon. Then I saw him. Across the street, standing perfectly still, watching the store. My blood ran cold. It was Wilson. The man from Chloe's photo. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against my sternum. I desperately texted Chloe, "When will you be done?" No response. She was probably in court, phone off. I watched, paralyzed, as Wilson flicked his cigarette butt away. He started crossing the street, not hurrying, taking his time, as if he knew I was trapped, a prey in a cage. I fumbled to double-check the door lock, then practically dove behind the counter where the panic button lay. He walked right up to the glass door. Knock, knock, knock. Polite, like any customer. I didn't move. He knocked again, harder this time. Then, he pressed his face against the glass, cupping his hands around his eyes, peering inside. Our eyes met. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. He pointed at the door handle, mouthing, "Open up." I shook my head, my throat suddenly dry. He slammed his fist against the glass, so hard the entire frame rattled. Then he held something up. My stomach dropped. It was Chloe's wallet. He pointed at it, then at the door, still smiling that awful, knowing smile. My hand instinctively went for my phone to call 911, but he shook his head. He held up his other hand, dangling Chloe's car keys, jangling them tauntingly. "She's hurt," he mouthed, pointing down the street, then back at the door. I was frozen, my mind racing. Had he actually done something to her? Or was this just a sick game, a twisted display of stolen items? But then he pulled out his phone, and through the glass, he showed me a photo. I couldn't breathe. It was Chloe's car, the windshield completely smashed. He backed up a few steps, and for a split second, I thought he was leaving. But then, from inside his hoodie, he pulled out a crowbar. The first blow was a sickening crack. My breath hitched. The glass spiderwebbed but held. He hit it again, a heavier, more deliberate swing, and the crack spread like a deadly vine. I pressed the panic button, a desperate plea, but had no idea how long security would take. He kept swinging, each blow echoing like a gunshot, the cracks widening, splintering. Chunks of glass started falling inside, scattering across the polished floor. I called 911, my voice thin and reedy. Units are at least 10 minutes out, the dispatcher told me, her words a cold wave of despair. Wilson must have heard me, because his swings became harder, faster, a frenzied assault. The hole in the glass grew, gaping like a wound. He reached through, trying to unlock the door from the inside, but couldn't quite reach the bolt. In a surge of pure adrenaline, I grabbed a decorative display pole and swung it wildly at his arm. He yanked it back, a cruel laugh bubbling up from his chest. He went back to smashing. Now, half the door was gone. I ran to the back office, my mind screaming for another exit, but there was only the front door and a window painted shut. No escape. When I turned back, Wilson had cleared enough glass to step through. He was climbing into the store. I held the display pole like a weapon, but it felt pathetic against the heavy crowbar in his hand, against his sheer size. "Where's the cash?" he said, his voice terrifyingly calm amidst the shattered glass and chaos. I stammered, telling him Chloe hadn't done anything wrong. He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "She stole from me first," he sneered, "owed me commissions." He swung the crowbar. Crash! A display case shattered, jewelry flying everywhere. "Every piece in here should be mine," he snarled, smashing another. I tried to edge toward the door, but he moved, blocking my path, raising the crowbar. "You're going to open that register." I told him I didn't know the code, but he grabbed my shirt, shoving me against the counter. His breath, a foul mix of beer and cigarettes, scorched my face. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils dilated with rage. He pressed the crowbar against my throat, a cold, unyielding weight. "Try harder." I punched in random numbers. The register beeped angrily. He pushed the crowbar harder against my windpipe. I couldn't breathe. Spots danced in my vision, the world narrowing to that metallic glint and his enraged eyes. "Last chance," he hissed. I was seeing stars, my lungs burning, when we both heard it, sirens in the distance. His face twisted with pure, unadulterated rage. He raised the crowbar high above his head. I knew, with sickening certainty, he was going to cave my skull in before the cops arrived. This is it, I thought, this is how it ends. The crowbar started its descent, a blur of deadly metal. I twisted hard to the right, raising the display pole with both hands, a desperate, last-ditch effort. Clang! The metal crashed together with a horrifying, teeth-aching shriek. The impact threw me sideways into a jewelry case, glass digging into my hip. Wilson stumbled from the deflected blow, almost losing his balance. I scrambled around the other side of the counter, screaming as loud as my bruised throat would allow. The sirens were getting deafeningly loud now. I just needed to survive another 30 seconds. He lunged after me, but slipped on the broken glass, going down hard on one knee. His hand shot out to catch himself, and the crowbar clattered across the floor. If you're still with me and on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I have so many more unbelievable stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. I grabbed my phone from the counter and threw it at his head with all my might. It bounced off his shoulder, and he cursed, trying to stand back up. I knocked over a display rack to block his path, necklaces scattering everywhere. He kicked through them, his eyes locked on the crowbar again. Just then, the door frame filled with uniforms. Shouting erupted. "Drop the weapon. Get on the ground." 3 officers burst through the broken door, guns drawn. Wilson spun towards them, still reaching for the crowbar. They moved as one, tackling him into the broken glass. He went down hard, yelling incoherently about his commissions. One officer pinned his arm while another snatched the crowbar, tossing it away like it was poison. They flipped him over, cuffing his hands behind his back as he continued to rage about Chloe owing him money. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall, finally able to breathe, but unable to stop shaking. Everything happened so fast, and now it was over, and I couldn't process any of it. An EMT named Reese Stratton knelt beside me, gently checking my throat where the crowbar had left angry red marks. She shined a light in my eyes, asking me to follow her finger, while another EMT examined my shoulder. A bruise was already forming where the first swing had connected when I blocked him. Reese told me to take slow breaths and checked my pulse, murmuring something about shock. Officer King Howard walked over, holding his phone. He showed me a photo, Chloe's actual car, the windshield completely smashed. Found 2 blocks from the courthouse, he said. My stomach plummeted. Wilson really had attacked her car before coming here. He must have followed her this morning, waited for her to go inside, and then unleashed his fury. Howard asked if I needed to sit somewhere more comfortable, but I couldn't move yet. My phone rang. It was Chloe, sobbing and apologizing from the courthouse bathroom. She'd just heard what happened from someone who saw the police cars outside her shop. She was racing back, but traffic was bad. She was 15 minutes away. I told her I was okay, though I wasn't sure that was true. The officers started bagging everything as evidence. The crowbar went into a clear bag, along with Chloe's wallet and keys Wilson had. They collected pieces of glass with blood on them from where he'd fallen. Officer Howard sat next to me on the floor, taking my initial statement. I recounted everything, from seeing Wilson across the street to the officers tackling him. He wrote it all down in a small notebook and asked me to spell my name twice. We sat on the store's front step now, as they needed to process the inside. I was still shaking, unable to stop, no matter how many deep breaths I took. Howard gave me a case number on a business card. He said I needed to go to the ER for my throat and shoulder, then come to the station later for a full statement. I nodded, but my mind was on the destroyed door, all of Chloe's merchandise sitting exposed. Anyone could walk in and take whatever they wanted before she got here. Howard must have seen my worry. He said they'd have an officer stay until Chloe arrived. Reese came back over. We really should get you checked out at the hospital. I'm worried about your throat, injuries there can swell up hours later. The idea of my throat closing up when I was alone tonight made me agree. They helped me stand. My legs were still wobbly, but I could walk. Wilson was in the back of a police car now, still yelling through the window about money. I didn't look at him as we passed, but I could feel him watching me. Reese guided me to the ambulance and helped me sit on the back step. She took my blood pressure again, listened to my breathing. Another EMT brought over an ice pack from my shoulder, which felt heavenly against the throbbing pain. I watched 2 more police cars arrive, officers putting up yellow tape around the storefront. A small crowd had gathered across the street, everyone holding up their phones to record. This was probably already on social media. I wondered if my mom would see it. Reese asked if there was anyone I wanted her to call, but I shook my head. I'd deal with all that later, when I could think straight. She reiterated the risk of my throat swelling and potentially blocking my airway completely. The chilling thought of being alone in my apartment as my throat closed made me climb into the ambulance without another word. They strapped me to the gurney and started in 4 as we drove to the hospital, no sirens. The ER was crowded, but they rushed me straight back because of the throat injury. A nurse checked my vitals again, and a doctor ordered x-rays of my neck and shoulder. The x-ray tech positioned me in different ways, telling me to hold still while the machine clicked. Back in the exam room, they put ice on my shoulder. The doctor showed me the images on a computer screen. There was dark bruising along my windpipe and something called a bone bruise where the crowbar first hit my shoulder. You're lucky, the doctor said, his voice grave. A direct hit could have crushed your windpipe completely. They gave me prescriptions for pain meds and told me to rest my voice for a few days. While I was waiting for discharge papers, a detective walked in. She introduced herself as Detective Safia Penn, a sharp woman in a gray suit, and asked if I was up for giving my full statement. She pulled out a recorder and had me go through everything from when Chloe first asked me to watch the shop. I told her about Chloe showing me the panic button, about how terrified she'd been that morning. Penn asked specific questions about Wilson's behavior, what exactly he'd said about commissions. She wanted every detail about him, showing me Chloe's wallet, the photo of the smashed car. I described how he swung the crowbar, breaking through the door piece by piece. She had me explain exactly how he grabbed me, pressed the crowbar against my throat. Penn even asked me to describe his breathing, if I noticed alcohol on his breath. The door flew open and Chloe rushed in, mascara streaked down her face. She was apologizing over and over, trying to hug me, sobbing about how sorry she was. Part of me wanted to be furious at her for not warning me better, for not telling me how truly dangerous Wilson was, but she looked so broken and scared that I just let her hold me while she cried. Penn waited for Chloe to calm down, then explained what she'd pieced together so far. Wilson probably followed Chloe to the courthouse that morning, waited for her to go inside. He smashed her car window to steal her wallet and keys, then came straight to the shop. Penn said the fact that he planned it all out made the charges way more serious. Chloe kept saying she should have told me more about his temper, his drinking problem. Penn took notes on everything Chloe knew about Wilson, including where he might be staying. The nurse came back with my discharge papers and instructions about watching for breathing problems. Chloe drove me to my car at the shop. There was still glass everywhere and yellow tape across the door. My phone started buzzing with texts from people asking if I was okay. Someone had already posted a video of Wilson getting arrested, and it had thousands of views in just a few hours. The comments were brutal, most people blaming Chloe for hiring him in the first place, saying she should have seen the warning signs. Chloe called a locksmith to secure everything before dark. We waited in the car, watching people slow down to stare at the damage. The locksmith arrived and started measuring for a metal grate to go over the new door. A boarding company showed up to cover the broken window with plywood. Every bang of the hammer made me flinch, and Chloe grabbed my hand each time. The locksmith drilled holes for the grate mounting, and the sound echoed the crowbar hitting glass. It took them 2 hours to secure everything, and Chloe wrote them checks with shaking hands. That evening, I was trying to eat dinner when Penn called my cell. Wilson made bail, but they put a GPS ankle monitor on him. He couldn't come within 500 feet of the shop or either of our homes. If he violated it, even once, he went straight to jail. I still got up 3 times to check that my apartment door was locked. Chloe texted, asking if I'd come stay at her place because she was too scared to be alone. I packed a bag and drove over, even though I was exhausted and my shoulder was killing me. We ended up on her couch, watching dumb comedies and pretending to laugh at the jokes. Every time a car drove by outside, we both tensed, looking at the window. Neither of us mentioned it, but we were both listening for footsteps, for breaking glass. Around midnight, we tried to sleep, but kept checking our phones every few minutes. At 2 a.m., a car door slammed outside, and I was instantly wide awake. My heart pounded. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. Chloe was awake too. We were both frozen on the couch, not even breathing. We listened for more sounds and finally heard voices. It was just her neighbor coming home late from a bar. Neither of us slept much after that. When the sun came up, we headed to the shop to meet the contractors Chloe had called. The main guy walked around the storefront, shaking his head, running his hands along the door frame. He pulled out a chunk of wood that just crumbled in his fingers. He showed us how Wilson hadn't just smashed the glass, but had bent the whole metal frame out of shape with that crowbar. Now, the entire thing needed replacing, not just new glass. He typed numbers into his phone and showed Chloe the new estimate, double what she'd expected. Her face went white. While the contractors measured and took photos, we started going through the smashed display cases with a clipboard, checking what was still there against Chloe's inventory sheets. The big pieces were mostly accounted for, but tons of smaller stuff was missing. Rings and bracelets, about $3,000 worth, gone. Chloe kept saying Wilson must have grabbed handfuls while he was destroying everything. But there was no way to prove what he took versus what might have just gotten lost in all that broken glass. She wanted to open back up right away, even with the board still covering half the storefront, because she was bleeding money every day they stayed closed. I told her I wasn't ready to be back in that space yet, and she got mad. She said she understood I was scared, but she had bills to pay and couldn't afford to wait until I felt better. We stood there arguing in front of the boarded window, and I could tell she was about to cry from frustration when a car pulled up and her landlord got out, looking furious. He walked straight up to us, demanding to know what happened to his property, whether Chloe's insurance was going to cover all the damage. He kept pointing at the plywood and the bent door frame, saying this was exactly the kind of trouble he didn't need, and maybe it was time to think about whether a jewelry store was really the right fit for his building. Chloe tried explaining about the restraining order, how Wilson was wearing an ankle monitor now, but the landlord just shook his head. He said he'd think about whether to renew her lease when it came up in 3 months. After he left, Chloe's phone rang. It was someone from the prosecutor's office, a woman named Danielle Mayer, saying they were charging Wilson with assault, burglary, vandalism, and theft. She'd be handling the case and I'd probably need to testify if Wilson didn't take a plea deal. She gave us her direct number and said to call if we remembered any other details about the attack. That night, I was heating up soup when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a blocked number. The voice was muffled, but I could still make out the words telling me I should think real carefully about what I say to the cops about Wilson. My hand started shaking because I recognized the voice as someone who used to work at Chloe's shop with Wilson, another guy who'd quit a few months back. I called Penn right away and played her the message over the phone. She came to my apartment within an hour with a notebook and had me write down everything I remembered about the voice and what exactly was said. She helped me file a report about the threat and then pulled out a map of my neighborhood, marking different routes I could take home from work and the gym. She gave me her personal cell number and 2 other emergency contacts, plus suggested we come up with a code word I could text Chloe if something felt wrong. We picked inventory, since it would seem normal for the shop. Penn also showed me how to share my location with Chloe's phone and suggested I vary my routine so nobody could predict where I'd be. Before she left, she mentioned a self-defense class at the community center that was starting next week and thought it might help me feel more in control. I signed up online that night, and the instructor emailed me right back with links to videos about staying aware of your surroundings and basic escape moves if someone grabs you. The next day, we went back to the shop to keep cleaning up. I was sweeping glass into a dustpan when I felt something slice into my palm. Blood started dripping onto the floor, and Chloe rushed over with the first aid kit, wrapping my hand while we both just stood there, realizing how messed up this all was. She kept apologizing as she taped the bandage, and I noticed her hands had little cuts all over them too from handling broken pieces all morning. We were both walking around damaged, trying to put things back together while our bodies kept finding new ways to remind us what happened here. The insurance adjuster showed up while my hand was still throbbing. He started taking photos of everything, but he kept making comments about how some of the display cases looked old already, asking if we were sure they were all in perfect condition before. Chloe had to dig through her phone, finding photos from the week before that showed all the cases intact. And even then, he kept suggesting that some of the damage might have been there already. He measured every crack, documented each broken piece, but you could tell he was looking for ways to pay out less money. Chloe pulled up receipts on her laptop, showing when she'd bought each display case and how much they cost new. But the adjuster just kept writing in his notebook and saying he'd have to review everything with his supervisor. We spent 2 hours going through every damaged item while he questioned whether things were really worth what Chloe claimed and whether Wilson had actually caused all the damage or if some of it was wear and tear. The adjuster finally left after 3 hours, and Chloe slumped against the counter, looking completely defeated. We locked up and walked to the coffee shop down the street. She ordered 2 lattes with shaky hands, then stirred sugar into her cup for way too long before looking up at me, her eyes red. She said she knew Wilson had a temper when she hired him, but the shop was so busy during the holidays that she desperately needed the help. She'd seen him get mad at customers who took too long deciding, and once he'd punched the wall in the back room when a shipment came in wrong, but he showed up on time, and could move heavy boxes, and she kept telling herself it would be fine once the busy season ended. I pushed my coffee away and told her straight up that I'd keep helping, but only if she promised to put safety first from now on. No more ignoring red flags just to keep the shop running. She nodded, her face grim, and pulled out her phone to look up security companies while I made a list of new rules, like always having 2 people in the shop and installing more cameras. We were still writing everything down when my phone rang with a number I didn't know. The guy on the other end said he was a reporter from the local paper and wanted our side of the story because Wilson's friends were posting all over social media, saying Chloe owed him thousands in commissions. I told him we'd only give facts about the attack and nothing else, then hung up when he kept pushing for more details. My phone immediately rang again, and this time it was my mom, who'd seen the news story online. She was crying, begging me to stop helping at the shop because no amount of money was worth getting killed over. I couldn't really argue with her and promised to think about it, but we both knew I wasn't going to abandon Chloe now. 3 days later, we sat in the back row of the courtroom for Wilson's bail hearing. The prosecutor wanted him held without bail, but the judge decided to keep him out with more rules instead. Wilson had to do random drug tests, couldn't drink any alcohol, and had to be home by 8 every night. Penn leaned over and whispered that this was normal for assault cases, even though it felt so wrong to me. The judge kept going, saying the GPS monitor would send an alert if Wilson came within 500 feet of the shop, our apartments, or the courthouse. If he violated any of these rules, he'd go straight to jail. Wilson stood there in a suit that didn't quite fit right, nodding at everything the judge said while his lawyer, Conrad Lowe, kept putting his hand on Wilson's shoulder. The next week, Chloe and I spent the whole morning at her kitchen table, getting ready for the restraining order hearing. We had printed out every threatening text, photos of all the damage, copies of the police reports, medical records from my ER visit, and witness statements from people who'd seen Wilson's behavior at the shop before. The stack of papers was almost 2 inches thick, and looking at it all together made my stomach hurt. In court that afternoon, Wilson's lawyer stood up and called the whole thing a misunderstanding about wages that got out of hand. He said Wilson was just trying to collect money he was owed, and things escalated when we wouldn't listen to him. The judge cut him off, her voice sharp. "Are you really trying to minimize an attack with a deadly weapon?" Conrad Lowe started to answer, but the judge was already looking through our evidence pile. She spent 10 minutes reading everything while we all sat there in silence, the only sound the rustle of papers. Then she looked up and said she was granting a 3-year restraining order covering both me and Chloe, plus the shop location. Wilson couldn't contact us directly or through other people and had to turn in any guns or weapons he owned within 24 hours. We walked out of the courtroom, and immediately, some guy started filming us with his phone. Chloe asked him to stop, but he kept recording and asking if we had any comment about the case. 2 court security officers came over and told the guy to leave, then walked us through a back hallway to the parking garage. One of them stayed with us until we got to our cars and made sure nobody else was following us. Chloe hugged me in the parking garage, and we both started crying. It felt like we could finally breathe again, even though we knew this wasn't really over. The next morning, a woman from Victim Services called and walked me through applying for compensation funds that could cover my medical bills and the days I'd missed from my regular job. She explained the forms I needed to fill out and where to get copies of my medical records, then connected me with a therapist who specialized in violent crime victims. My first appointment was 3 days later in a small office downtown. The therapist had me describe exactly what happened, and when I got to the part about the crowbar against my throat, my hand went up to touch the spot without thinking. She showed me this grounding exercise where I press my feet flat on the floor and count 5 things I can see, 4 I can hear, 3 I can touch, 2 I can smell, and 1 I can taste, which sounds dumb, but actually helped when the memories started feeling too real. Meanwhile, Chloe decided to do a soft reopening with just her regular customers who'd been texting asking when she'd be back, keeping the boarded section up while contractors worked on permanent repairs. I helped her that first morning back and watched 3 different customers bring flowers. One older lady even brought a whole tray of cookies, which made Chloe cry. And then I was crying too, because people were being so incredibly nice. The insurance adjuster finally called after 3 weeks of back and forth with a check that covered most of the damage, plus enough extra for Chloe to upgrade the whole security system with better cameras that recorded to the cloud and panic buttons in 3 spots instead of just 1. Detective Penn called me 2 days later, saying Wilson had taken a plea deal for 2 years probation with anger management classes and monthly restitution payments to cover what insurance didn't. It meant no prison time, which still felt unfair, but at least we wouldn't have to testify at trial. I'd been going to self-defense classes at the community center. During my 3rd class, the instructor had me practice breaking out of different holds. When he grabbed me from behind in a chokehold, I remembered the steps and actually broke free on my first try. The instructor said my muscle memory was developing faster than most students, and I actually believed I might be able to defend myself better if something happened again. 3 weeks after the attack, Chloe and I had this whole new routine where we texted each other when we got home safe every night. The shop always had at least 2 people working, even during slow times, and we'd moved the panic buttons to spots near the door, register, and back office. We weren't the same people we'd been before Wilson smashed through that door. The fear still lives in a quiet corner of our minds, a constant hum of awareness. But we were functioning, getting through each day without jumping at every sound. Looking back from where we are now, we're not magically healed or anything. Healing is a process, not a destination. But the shop is more secure than it's ever been with the new cameras and alarms. We both have therapists we see regularly. Wilson can't come near us without going straight to jail. And most importantly, we've proven to ourselves that we can survive the worst thing we could imagine and keep going. We are stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Seriously, life's always throwing lessons at us if we actually stop and pay attention. Until we cross paths again, my friend. If you made it to the very end of this story, drop a comment below and tell me, what's one moment in your life that changed you forever? I love reading all your comments.